We're going to continue the reading of Mustafa Hamid's book with Leah Farrall, The Arabs at War in Afghanistan. This is the chapter entitled Azzam, Sayyaf, and Bin Laden Establish the Maktab Al Khidamat. There's going to be two parts to this reading of the video of the book. And I'll make myself the speaker read it. The creation of an Arab-led organization did come to be supported by Abdullah Azzam, Abdul Rasul Sayyaf, and Osama bin Laden. But the organization they established, and subsequently called Maktab Al Khidamat, differs significantly from what Mustafa Hamid and his friends had proposed. Mustafa Hamid. The bottom line is both my papers made it to the same people, and together they helped influence the decision to create an Arab organization. But it turned out very differently to the one suggested, both in its scope and application in the field. Now remember, during the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan, it was a war against the Afghans. The Arabs came a little bit later, but there were no training camps for Arabs. And until Osama bin Laden came and started using his father's construction group called the Saudi bin Laden Group, using their dirt loaders, their diggers, and other excavation trucks, they began to get a little bit more recognition. And through the influence of Abdul Rasul Sayyaf, they opened up a training camp, but in the far areas of in Gardez in Afghanistan, southern Afghanistan. But it was a key point because it was about, a couple of miles away, there was a Russian outpost, but it didn't have many Russians in it. So this training camp was for Arabs only. And this came at the criticisms of other Afghan warlords. But there was very few Afghan warlords that would allow even Arabs into their ranks. One of them was a camp run by Jalaluddin Haqqani, who would later become an organization that's still around called the Haqqani Network. Abdul Rasul Sayyaf was another. And Gulbuddin Hekmatar of the Itub-e-Islami Army. So, very, very few. And these, by the way, these Afghan warlords would get the highest in terms of CIA funding, which was nicknamed Operation Cyclone, with the help of the Pakistan ISI. Later on, these groups, these Arabs who got training and military aid, would go back to their home countries and form groups of their own. One of them was Abu Sayyaf in the Philippines, Jemaah Islamiyah in Indonesia, and of course Al-Qaeda, which grew out of a training camp called the al-Masri, which would form a group called Al-Qaeda in the Sudan, and then later be given more recognition when bin Laden moved back to Afghanistan in '96. Leah Farrall, how did Maktab Al Khidamat differ in relation to what you and your friends have proposed? Mustafa Hamid. Military training was poorly done until the arrival of Abu Burhan al-Suri, who lifted the quality of training, which we will talk some more about later. The ammunition project was never adopted as part of the Maktab Al Khidamat. No manufacturing was ever carried out. Aid dispersal, one of Maktab Al Khidamat's main jobs, was not done well. Maktab Al Khidamat also and this is in the Arabic, in the English, it's called the Afghan Services Bureau, gave money to the Afghans who were transferring weapons and ammunition inside. But the Afghans tricked them because most of Maktab Al Khidamat's people were based in Peshawar. There were a few to supervise the aid going over the border. Some Afghans took advantage of this and used to take the same shipment back and forth several times and claim money for its transport each time. One shipment went back and forth 4 times before the fraud was discovered. Leah Farrall. How about the media work? Seemed that did well. Al Jihad magazine, for example, was very successful. Mustafa Hamid. The media work was for the Ikhwan Muslimin and for Abdul Rasul Sayyaf, and then after the Jamal al-Rahman. It was for the case It was for the cause of Afghanistan from the point of view of the Ikhwan Muslimin and for their interest. The media work was done well for that view, but it was a limited view and did not fully represent the Afghan cause. Leah Farrall. Would it be correct to say that the Maktab Al Khidamat alternative path and function came because of the differing and perhaps the competing agendas of its three sponsors? Seems to me that bin Laden's decision to support the establishment of the Maktab Al Khidamat was influenced by his visits to the front lines when he became aware of the poor conditions in which the Mujahideen were living and fighting. I read that at Azzam's urging, bin Laden went inside Afghanistan to one of Sayyaf's fronts to see the condition for himself. I think it was in the Jaji Ali Khil area, Mustafa Hamid. It was Jaji, but it was after Maktab Al Khidamat had already been formed. Abu Abdallah, also known as Osama bin Laden, went directly to the front lines because he was afraid of the reaction of the Saudi government. As Azzam said, at first Abu Abdallah was even afraid to go to Peshawar. When Abu Abdallah first started traveling, he only went to Lahore, to Jamaat-e-Islami. He paid the money and then it was transferred to the Mujahideen. This continues until the formation of the Maktab Al Khidamat. What overall, and this was in Abdullah Anas, an Algerian guerrilla fighter who helped form the Maktab Al Khidamat with Abdullah Yusuf Azzam, basically wanted was to have buildings. You know, with Abdullah Yusuf Azzam and Abdullah Anas, what they wanted was to basically get the recruitments of Arabs from other countries to be better situated in Islamabad, Jalalabad, Peshawar, to basically coordinate in different areas of which they will function. Now, there were different buildings, military committee building, a wives building, a widows building, for they receive benefits from their husbands and sons and families, loved ones' death. There was a media building. There was a religious training building. I mean, there was different buildings over time. And this would later be used to coordinate Al-Qaeda, because Al-Qaeda had a Shura Council, which is a religious committee. They had a media committee to make propaganda videos. They had a military committee where they would train guerrillas to fight against the communists. Al-Qaeda wasn't an international terrorist organization. That wasn't the essence of Al-Qaeda. The essence of Al-Qaeda was based on that training base, al-Masri, to train Arabs to fight against the communists in Afghanistan, even when the Soviets left, under then Najibullah. And they were fighting against him to get him out so that Afghanistan could be ruled by the Hanafi-led Taliban. I mean, the Afghans. But the Taliban took over and basically fought alongside the likes of, you know, real ghouls like Gulbuddin Hekmatyar, who would throw acid in women's faces for not wearing the burqa, to fight against, you know, the Northern Alliance led by the Lion of Panjshir. And boy, now that's killing me. I forgot his name. How can I forget that man's name? Wow, I can't believe I'm forgetting his name. Ahmed Shah Massoud. Ahmed Shah Massoud. And the Uzbeks and others. But yeah, that was the makeup of the Maktab Al Khidamat, the essence of it. And after the formation of the Maktab Al Khidamat, Azzam convinced Abu Abdallah to come to Peshawar and visit with Sayyaf. And then later he told Abu Abdallah to go see Sayyaf in Jaji. Azzam supported Sayyaf, and he wanted Abu Abdallah to go so he could see that Sayyaf was the most competent leader out of all of them. Abu Abdallah visited secretly, of course, but he visited in winter and Sayyaf was not there. So Abu Abdallah found himself alone and with a few Mujahideen in miserable conditions. You got to remember, these fighters had nothing. You know, the Afghans were not really fully supportive of Arabs fighting their war. This is the reason why the Arabs later on didn't want NGOs, non-government organizations, to become involved because they knew where they were coming from, the United States. And what the Arabs said later on, or as they called them Afghan Arabs, was that the Arabs that were not affiliated with Abdullah Azzam, because these were more militant types, people from Egypt, takfiris, as they would call them, they grew tired of Azzam because Azzam was more philosophical in what jihad was. But these people wanted martyrdom. They wanted jihad to be against the West, outside of Afghanistan. And they hated American NGOs, didn't want them around. They started to explain to him, so he came to know that Peshawar was very different to the front. And Jaji, the Mujahideen, were living in tents on the mountains. There were no caves. Planes came and bombed them. There were no medical facilities. And all the groups were organizing themselves separately. Abdullah became very angry at Maktab Al Khidamat and the others and asked him, "What are you doing there? What are you spending the money and the millions that come to you?" He had also heard that there were corruption problems inside the Maktab Al Khidamat initially. Leah Farrall, I am curious as to why Azzam hadn't seen the same thing. Mustafa Hamid. Usually when Arabs traveled to the front lines, their trips were prepared, and they were treated and housed as guests and traveled with a big leader. They did not see the real picture. Azzam did not get the chance Abu Abdallah had because he never traveled to the front and sat alone with the Mujahideen when there was no big leader there. So Abu Abdallah, unlike Azzam, got to see the real situation. And remember, Azzam came to Afghanistan at the behest of Abdullah Rasul Sayyaf. It was Sayyaf who reached out to Azzam while he was teaching in Saudi Arabia. That's how Osama bin Laden got to hear of Abdullah Yusuf Azzam. And Sayyaf invited him, and he came under Abdullah Rasul Sayyaf's invitation. And Sayyaf housed him and his wife and basically housed him until he got his own place, until, because Azzam was out of work and he basically needed money to, and then he found a calling, was that he would teach these Arabs about the legitimacy of what true jihad is. Here you have a secular communist entity that is killing Muslims in Afghanistan. And so we should fight against this apostate regime. And, Arabs, and Azzam was a notable orator. And so that was attractive to them. And he was also a hafiz, which is a man that has memorized the Quran. So he was well scholared. He was well schooled in theology, well schooled in jihad. And so, Muslims from Algeria and France and North Africa and Southeast Asia, they came to him. When he saw the conditions, Abu Abdallah said he felt guilty for taking so long to visit. And he felt it was a big sin they had not come early. He found himself wanting to be martyred there. Boy, don't we wish that would have happened. He started diverting money from the Maktab Al Khidamat and started spending it himself inside Afghanistan. From that point onwards, Abu Abdallah began to insist on working inside Afghanistan and on the battlefield. That meant the Arabs had a leader and money and direction at work. And I'll read up to here and then do part 2 later on. Leah Farrall, if bin Laden's first real visit to the front line came after Maktab Al Khidamat was established, why then do you think he initially supported its establishment? Did Azzam influence him? Abu Abdallah, Mustafa Hamid. Abu Abdallah did briefly visit in 1984. And he went because Sayyaf was making a big circus with a battle in the Ali Kelly area, which he put in a 2-part video called Shawani 1 and 2. In that battle, they were firing the anti-aircraft gun. And they told me every day that they were spending 2 million rupees on ammunition using this gun against the aircraft. This made me very angry because it was too much and it was very wasteful. And so, this is a very key part of the book because from here, we see the beginning stages of Osama bin Laden creating an organization from the training camp to this Afghan Services Bureau, which later on would have very debilitating ramifications in that Abdullah Azzam, who was initially the essence behind it, would soon be pushed out by nefarious figures that would later on have a devastating effect on the world. Okay. So listen, thank you very much for tuning in, guys, and see you in the next video. Take care.